Hey, everybody, it's SASFest, and this is Fay Jacobs coming to you from Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. And I get to interview author Ann McMan today. Now, Ann has done so many books and all kinds of different uh, stories and mysteries and romance and all kinds of things. So I get to talk to her this morning about a brand new book, Dead Letters from Paradise. And I've got bunches of questions for her. So here we go. Hello, Ann.
Hello, Fay.
How are you this morning?
I'm doing great, and I'm
Eh,
thrilled. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to. Actually, it's a huge opportunity for me, but to do anything to support saints and sinners is just an honor,
for
especially
me
with you.
too. Yep, for me too. Well, here we go. I'm going to ask you about the new book because I just finished it and I have so many feelings about it. It is such a wonderful book. And I have questions. Here, there it is, Dead Letters from Paradise. And it is a great title for a really fascinating book. I know you've written 14 novels, romances, mysteries, literary comedies, which is a great genre. You've won Lambda Literary Awards and more recognitions that I can mention, not to mention awesome sales numbers. And all the books except the Jericho series are on totally different topics. How do you come up with your ideas?
Well, it is true that I've sold tens of copies of the books, but you know what? I think honestly, how I come up with ideas is probably the easiest question to answer. And I think back to what the great writer Toni Morrison once said, that the responsibility of the writer was to bear witness to the experiences of other people. So I mean, in a sense, you're kind of like the ultimate voyeur. But I find what works well for me, because I do tend to gravitate toward quirky and offbeat topics, is I listen. I might be standing in line at the post office for 10 or 12 hours trying to send and if you just pay attention, if you listen to conversations all around you, you get all the information and inspiration you need. And I can share with you, I love to talk about this. Many years ago, way before I ever even thought about writing something, I was fortunate enough to attend a reading by the great Southern writer Doris Betts. And after she did her reading, she took questions from the audience. And this man got to his feet and he said, "You live in Pittsboro, North Carolina, don't you?" And this is a tiny little town, probably 1,200 people. And Doris Betts said, "Yes, sir, that's right, I do." And he said, "What on earth do you do there?" She thought about it for a second, and then she said, "I pay attention."
Excellent.
So, and I think, I think you do the same thing, where you get the inspiration for your essays, you pay attention and it's all around you and it's there for the taking.
And see what's going on. Exactly,
Right.
exactly. Now, in Dead Letters from Paradise, and it's an intriguing title, what was your motivation for setting the book during the 60s and the sit-in era? That to me was fascinating time capsule. Tell me about it.
I have never, except when I was in college and I majored in history, I have never written anything in a historical context ever. The prospect of doing that just terrified me, primarily because the enormity of the research that I was confident would be involved. But once I got the idea for the story, that I wanted to tell a story about a spinster who manages a dead letter office in a small town post office, the rest of it developed organically. I knew that it was going to be a Southern novel because I live in the South. I live in North Carolina. And even though I've been here for almost 50 years, they still call me a Yankee. But I knew those things going into it. So when I started doing the research, I learned very quickly that the US Postal Service did away with dead letter offices, regional ones, in 1957. There just weren't any. So I couldn't set it in contemporary times. I had to go back in time. So that's what drove me to set it in the era of about 1960. And there is no way you can live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and not know that Winston-Salem and Greensboro, about 20 miles away, were the two cities in the South where the lunch counter sit-in movement started. So that to me became obvious, essential elements of the story.
Well, and they're very moving as well. And they're wonderful characters. And you really get a glimpse of what it was like then. And I think that's fabulous. But you also get a glimpse of what it was like for a same-sex couple to be living in that era. And they're great, great characters. Watching EJ slowly awaken to the idea that her two neighbors have a deeper relationship than just friends. It was wonderful. And with that theme too, it's kind of a historical novel of same-sex couples in those years. What did you want to portray with the neighborly couple?
Yeah, well, the neighbors who gradually begin to draw the main character, Esther, or EJ, as she goes by, out of her cocoon of self-isolation, they were hiding in plain sight, as people did in that era. And as EJ slowly awakens to the entire world around her, I mean, she's the ultimate woman who's sleepwalking through history and doesn't really see anything beyond the purview of her own little piece of real estate. And her gradual awareness that there is a deep and profound romantic relationship between her neighbors, Fay, Marian, and Inez, dovetails with her own understanding that it's possible for her not only to have a sexual identity, but that it at least the possibility exists that this could happen between women of the same sex. And as her awakening progresses, that community gets larger. She also discovers that her favorite professor in college, who she idealized, is in a long-term committed relationship with another woman. So EJ does realize that all of these things could coexist. Go ahead.
That's really the backbone of the book, to me, is how EJ watches the world she knew nothing about just open up in front of her, which is very exciting. I have to ask a personal question. Next door to those women lived a man with his dog Morty, and he's a miniature.
I have no idea where the idea for a neurotic schnauzer came from.
No, I'm pretty sure you based it on my dog Windsor, and he wants royalties.
Okay.
Okay.
Ask Windsor if he takes Bitcoin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, he's too smart for that.
Okay.
A recurring theme in the book is fragrance and memory. And it's so beautiful to see you write about the aromas of the gardens. And then, of course, the Val de Nuit by Guerlain, which is the perfume that sort of sparks the story. Tell me about it.
Well, I understand, like many of us do, that the strongest memory center we all have is smell. It just is, more than sound, more than things you can touch, more than things you hear. There's something that's visceral about the way fragrances endure throughout our entire lives. And because Esther's life is so taken up with her work as a volunteer in this 18th century, 17th century herb garden in the community of Old Salem, fragrances were pervasive to her. The smell of the herbs and the plants, the smell of the soil. She talks about growing up and being enamored of the sweet potato jacks and the other confections that Nelson, the black man, who's the groundskeeper of the African Moravian church, that his wife bakes. She's surrounded by that. The Val de Nuit, for me, as the linchpin that eventually solves the mystery of who, maybe we should talk about what the mystery in the book actually
Oh,
is.
absolutely. Yeah.
Very quickly, Esther, as the manager of a dead letter office, is handed a packet of undeliverable letters, all written on the same stationery, same handwriting, all addressed to the same non-existent person, a woman named Marianne Evans. There is no return address. The only thing on the letters is a postmark from a small town in Virginia called Paradise. But the letters all carry a very distinctive fragrance that's mysterious and captivating. And it's through Esther tracking down what is the perfume and discovering how rare it is that she's able eventually to identify who the writer of the letters is.
It's a terrific mystery. I mean, it really is. As you're, enjoying the characters and the humor, there's some lovely humor, like you always do in this book. But as you're doing that, the mystery just unfolds, and it's really amazing.
Well,
yeah, go on.
The fragrance, the reason I picked that particular perfume, the Guerlain perfume Val de Nuit, which I believe they debuted in 1933. I think it was right after, it was like between the wars. And it was based on a poem by the same name. And the translation of the French is Night Flight. And the whole premise of the fragrance, like the poem, dealt with the mysterious inner life and passion of a woman. And even when Esther discovers what the fragrance is, and in 1960, it was available, but it was very expensive and mostly a special order, all of the advertisements for it were alluring and suggestive. And the slogans were things like, "Are you her type? Are you brave enough? Are you daring enough?" So to me, given the particular scent, the orange and bergamot, in the deeply herbal tones that the perfume had, made it a perfect fit for the mystery. So that's why I picked it.
I mean, it is. The mystery letter writer assumed, I think, that she was sort of writing for herself and that no one would ever read it. But the sleuthing of the EJ really, really upended that. Tell me how you researched what at that time a dead letter office did.
Oh man, talk about a fun rabbit hole. I mean, it was like I wanted to pack a sandwich, when I sat down to work on it. And the most amazing thing happened. When I started doing research on how dead letter offices worked, and they started 200 years ago, but how they worked during this period, it was fascinating. And these people who worked in these offices really were postal detectives. And they did these things. They had all these resources that they would use to track these things down. And what really became intriguing, and there's a whole museum in Washington, D.C. that inventories all of this incredible stuff that people actually sent through the US mail. Snow tires.
I want to go to the museum.
Snow tires. They put stamps on snow tires. Some Baba actually shipped a crate of live rattlesnakes.
Okay, that's disgusting.
With the appropriate postage. And the unhappy clerk who got this box heard something moving inside. They had like air holes poked in it, opened the box, and there were these damn rattlesnakes. And I think they might have clocked one with a cast iron skillet that also had been mailed. You know, so through all that research, I found these videos that had been recorded by the official United States Postal Service historian, this amazing woman named Jennifer Lynch. And I dug and dug and dug and finally got her email and wrote to her and told her about this book I was working on. I thought I would never hear from her in a million years. Next day, I got a response. She answered all my questions, attached all these scans of articles and stuff. So whenever I had a question, I would just write to Jennifer Lynch, who began to sign her emails Jenny, and actually made suggestions about the plot.
Oh, I love
So
it.
she became really engaged with it, you know, with the whole idea for how I could get around the fact that there were no regional dead letter offices in 1960, you know, and all that kind of thing. So that part was just so much fun. And when I was writing the book, it was really, really difficult for me to kind of keep the main story between those ditches, because I really wanted to go off and tell more stories about that craziness.
Well, talking about fun and craziness, my favorite character, of course, is 10-year-old, very precocious Harry. I hope she's based on someone you know, because I would love to meet her. Who was your inspiration? What did you want her to convey about the life and times of the era?
Oh, Fay, I thought you knew me. You do know her.
I do.
You
I
do
know.
know her.
Uh-huh.
I don't still have my eye patch because, you know, Harry wears an eye patch because
Yes,
she's
exactly.
got a,
It was my
yeah,
suspicion. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, Harry's me. I will say Harry is an aspirational version of me. I was never quite as heroic, you know, as Harry is. I actually enjoyed setting things on fire,
Oh
you know,
my,
when I
okay.
was a kid. But yeah, I mean, Harry, yeah,
Yeah.
Harry's me.
Well,
Harry's me.
I'm really glad to hear that, because she lit up the book. And
Literally.
well, yes. And readers who were hearing all about the mystery of the perfume and the gardens and all of this, Harry brings the story right to its basic parts and goes, so what's happening here? And I love her for that. And I'm sure readers are going to really love her for that.
Yeah, and that was really Harry's role in the book. Harry is really supposed to be not so much the voice of the author, but just the voice of reason and common sense.
Yes.
Harry is the one person who looks around at this world, you know, this enclosed Moravian ancient community formed by faith, where the elders still owned slaves and saw no inconsistency with that. Harry is the person who doesn't understand why she can't just go sit down at the lunch counter in Woolworths next to a black man and share a piece of pie.
Right.
She doesn't understand that. And she calls it out. She's like, how come? This ain't right. How come you grow all these herbs in here that are supposed to treat every single medical condition a person can have, but you don't plant anything in this garden that makes people treat each other better?
Wonderful character, wonderful. And she really brought the book to life, and I'm very excited about it. And being a fan of cocktails myself, one of my last questions here is, I am glad you included the recipe for the Boulevardier in the book. I recently saw one on the menu in Rehoboth Beach, and it looks like it's coming back.
Did you try it? Did
no,
you try
I
it?
Yet, but I'm going to try it. Why that drink for the lesbian couples to serve?
Well, you know, for one thing, and my wife Salem West was the person who pointed this out to me. She immediately said, unlike in your other books, these women cannot drink wine, because in 1960, wine in America was piss. Just
yes,
simple. Everybody drank cocktails. They just did. And virtually every household had a cocktail cart. We were like I don't know, what do you call like a Yankee redneck? I don't know.
I think
I
that's
mean,
it.
I grew up in the Allegheny Mountains of Pennsylvania. We had a cocktail cart.
Okay,
Okay.
well, yep.
Everybody did. Everybody
Yes,
did. So it was like, okay, something you know a lot about, Mad Men.
right,
This is
right.
the era. What
This
were
is
they always doing?
exactly having a cocktail.
At work.
Yeah, well,
My
of course,
opinion, we need to bring that tradition back.
clearly.
So it was like, I've got to pick a trendy, iconic cocktail that would have been in vogue during this era. So,
Fabulous.
and because, you know, throughout the book, Harry is always suspicious of anything that's French.
Right.
Anything, no matter what it is. You know, Fay Marian has all those junked Simca parts in her backyard, French cars, you know, French cologne, anything that's French. Inez one time is making a cassoulet,
Right,
you know,
right.
I wanted to pick something that had a French name. And you know, serendipity, you know how sometimes you just get lucky when you pick something? The Boulevardier was actually developed by one of the Vanderbilts
Well, of course.
in Paris in like 1927. And he was an expat who was editing what was like the Parisian New Yorker magazine. The name of the magazine was the Boulevardier.
Oh, wonderful.
So what he did is he essentially took a Negroni and he substituted bourbon for the gin. And instead of having bitters, they used Campari. So it was just, I thought it was ridiculous and quirky and unnecessarily tedious. And it also gave Fay Marian the opportunity to constantly call it a Bouvier after Jackie Kennedy.
Right, right. Well, it was inspired. It was inspired. And now that you have told us all of this and answered my questions, please read a little bit from please read from Dead Letters.
Okay. I picked out, I hope this holds together because I had to kind of cut it a little. Esther, actually, the most important thing in her life is her work as a volunteer in Old Salem's 17th century medicinal herb garden called the Hortus Medicus. So her work in the garden and the importance of the herbs not only drive the solution to the mystery, but they also inform the life that she lives. So this little section kind of talks about when Esther is actually reading the very first letter and discovers that it has practically erotic content about the ill-fated love affair between these two women who at one time worked in the same garden. Okay. After walking Harry back to Fay Marian's, I resolved to make it an early night. I changed into my nightgown and robe and sat down in Daddy's chair with my book. I had only a few chapters left to read, and I was determined to finish it this evening. But I was finding it hard to concentrate. Every time Della Street appeared in a scene, I thought about Fay Marian's sultry comment, and that naturally led me to recall the passage of the letter I'd read earlier. Her intimate touch was like the first bright bloom of Angelica. It was uncanny. Angelica was one of the herbs we cultivated in the Hortus Medicus. The Moravians had revered the plant for its numerous healing properties. According to Evelyn Haas, the master gardener, its uses went beyond compounds that treated typical maladies like catarrh, dyspepsia, and insomnia. In his vast colonial era compendium, Philadelphia apothecary Johann Sauer had noted the herb's special ability to bring down the menses for distressed women facing problem or unwanted pregnancies. Evelyn once winked and confided in me that Angelica was also compounded into a topical cream that proved efficacious for treating premature ejaculation. So, Evelyn quipped, one can say the earlier Moravians had everything covered. going and coming. Evelyn had an almost preternatural fascination with rumors and legends that hinted at a few more lurid aspects to early Moravian communal life, including veneration of homoerotic worship and obsession with the wounds of Christ. And she loved to draw parallels between those whispered stories and the eclectic healing properties of some of the herbs cultivated in the Hortus Medicus. Angelica, with its explosive globe-like clusters of flowers, was no exception. Of course, Angelica had also been used to ward off witches. In my mind, that attribute went hand in hand with Evelyn's colorful description of the herb's more prurient uses. I forced my attention back to the novel. Della Street was busily engaged using her charms to wrangle information out of a distracted travel agent. Its slender tendrils reached deep inside and laid claim to all my hidden longing. In frustration, I put the book aside. It was ridiculous. I drummed my fingers against the big rolled arm of Daddy's chair. Reading the rest of the letter would accomplish nothing. And bringing it home with me, even unwittingly, was a serious breach of protocol. And even if that hadn't been true, giving in to an unseemly impulse would make me no better than a child blowing a tin whistle to torment a neighbor's schnauzer. Trust me, Lottie had said, you need to read this twice, maybe more. Even though I feigned offense, I knew exactly what Lottie had referred to. I did withhold myself from the realm of sensual experience. It wasn't something I intended to suppress. It just seemed to happen naturally. I wasn't a prude. Not really, I thought. I'd had many friends during my years at Salem College, and I'd learned firsthand about the carnal exploits of some of my female classmates, including the lonely aftermath of non-consensual sexual encounters, panic-inducing pregnancy scares, and even some tales of their occasional sapphic experimentations with other girls. The more I learned, the less engaged I became. For me, it was tied more to a loss of control than it was to any innate fear of the experience. It wasn't that I was unaware of how vast and prevalent the forbidden realm of sensual experience was. It was more that I passively chose to ignore it. The clock on the mantel chimed. It was 10:15 p.m. I'd been sitting in the living room for more than an hour, and tomorrow was a work day in which I'd have to confront more of Lottie's shrewd scrutiny. She'd know I'd read the letter. And now it seemed inevitable that we'd have to read them all. Just the thought of that filled me with an emotion I couldn't identify, but it certainly wasn't anything approximating ease. In the midst of so much confusion, the only thing I was sure about was that sleep would not come easily.
Thank you for that wonderful reading. I have to go read the book again because I'm hearing new things. It's wonderful. And thanks for being willing to be interviewed about it and sharing with me the excitement about the 20th anniversary of Saints and Sinners, and hoping they can raise a lot of money on the giving day at the end of the month. And thank you all. And I can't wait for the next book now.
Thank you. And now we're going to do what we all should do, and let's get out our checkbooks and share some pride.
There you go.
Thank you very much, Fay.
Thank you.